Elon Musk and President Donald Trump have had a major fallout. So has the Dutch government, the UK Reform Party, and the Israeli government. And then China got caught smuggling deadly fungus across the US border. We're going to look at all this and more on today's Trumpet World. Ukraine's drone attack on Russia's strategic bomber fleet is probably the biggest story of the week. So big, in fact, that we devoted Wednesday's show to that subject. So if you want to know more, you can go back and look at that. I think we had a fascinating discussion on what this means to the United States, how the nature of warfare is changing, and even how that warfare points directly to prophecies in the book of Revelation about end-time warfare. So that was a really enjoyable discussion with Jeremiah and Mihailo. If you haven't seen that, you can go back and look that up. This week, though, certainly the spat between Donald Trump and Elon Musk is the most eye-catching story. Is it soap opera or substance? Well, we'll go to our US correspondent, Andrew Miller, to find out.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some pretty explosive fireworks here within the Make America Great Again movement in the United States. There's been signs for several weeks now that Donald Trump and Elon Musk were starting to part ways over the debt crisis in America, which is actually a pretty big divide between them ideologically, because the two things that really kind of brought Trump and Musk together in the first place, two men with very different political opinions, were a commitment to free speech and a commitment to making the U.S. government less wasteful. So yesterday, after Donald Trump pretty much came out fully endorsing his big, beautiful bill, his $2.5 trillion in deficit spending, and even went as far as saying that he agrees with Senator Elizabeth Warren, one of the most socialist senators in Congress, that the debt ceiling should be completely abolished. I think that understandably upset Musk quite a bit, and he started making some good points, basically retweeting things that Trump had said over the past 2 decades about why deficit spending's bad, why no congressman who approves a deficit should be eligible for re-election, how Barack Obama was destroying the country, why we need a balanced budget amendment that forces congressmen to adhere to the deficit. And basically really just highlighting for the American people to see what a hypocrite Donald Trump is being on this issue. Donald Trump, in classic fashion, did not respond to this criticism very well, and fired back that the real reason Musk cares about it, hates the big beautiful bill, has nothing to do with the deficit, but it's all because it cuts electric car subsidies, and he's the owner of the world's biggest electric car maker, or at least America's biggest electric car maker. I haven't necessarily seen proof to say that that's true, but Donald Trump definitely tried to pull focus away from the budget bill and make it personal, and Elon Musk fired right back, making it even more personal. I think the last update I saw, he was claiming that Donald Trump hasn't released the Epstein files because Trump's in them. I don't think he thought that one through very much, because assuming that's true, telling the world that Donald Trump pals around with pedophiles, you knew about it but didn't say anything till just now because you were friends, might not be the flex he thinks it is. But it's but yeah, it's definitely getting pretty ugly. Like I said, the underlying ideological issue is important. The fact that this bill approves a $2.5 trillion deficit, second biggest deficit in American history, outspends anything Barack Obama ever did, outspends anything Joe Biden ever did. The only bigger deficit was from Trump's first term. because Congress passed that COVID stimulus package. Then we had a $3 trillion deficit in Trump's first term. So a huge issue that's was starting to get some pretty good attention tomorrow morning and has now kind of been overshadowed by more personal attacks between Musk and Trump.
Yeah, just watching that, my reaction was kind of like, are our leaders 2-year-olds? It just got very personal very quickly, which it did look like they've backed away from that a little bit. Apparently, the two have scheduled a personal phone call today where they've said they're going to patch things up. But I mean, it is an encapsulation of some of the things that are wrong with society that I think have rubbed off on all of us. This just kind of emotional immaturity, being very quick to fire back responses and letting things escalate. And this did remind me of a prophecy we talk about a lot, a social prophecy we talk about a lot, Isaiah chapter 3, where God says that he takes away the prudent leaders, the counselor, the honorable man, somebody who might, this is, you could imagine maybe Abraham Lincoln, for example. He'd probably write a strongly worded letter, put it in a drawer and never send it, kind of thing. That we don't have people like that today. And it says, I will give children to be their princes and babes shall rule over them. And you've got this discussion or this big argument, very personal, between two people, both of whom have a lot of characteristics I admire. Like the courage of Donald Trump to stand up and go through everything that he's been doing, that he's done, the audacity, as well as just the brilliance of Elon Musk and the willingness to take on some of these major problems. Like, they shouldn't have to be at loggerheads, and sure, there's some disagreement, but they should be able to articulate that in a much better way. But that's, I guess, the level of discourse and the state of our leadership. And like I said, hopefully there'll be some patching up here. But on this question of the big, beautiful bill, Elon Musk certainly has exposed a lot of problems with this. We were talking in depth about the US deficit the other week. I mean, I think he probably could have made them in a better way to somebody he recently successfully worked quite well with, rather than turning on him quite sharply. But this is a serious problem, and at least Elon Musk sees that.
Right. Yeah. The emotional maturity point is a good one because actually Dave Ramsey, who is one of the more popular like biblical financial counselors on a personal for individuals here in the United States, points out often that one of the biggest hallmarks of an emotionally mature person is the ability to have delayed gratification. Toddlers can't do that. If they want something, they want it now, and they're going to scream till they get it. But delayed gratification, which is an extremely important spiritual characteristic to budgeting. He has the saying, instead of act your age, he says act your wage to people who are spending more than you have. He said it's irresponsible and emotionally immature to spend more money than you have just because you want something. And yet, apparently, pretty much everyone in the Senate, except maybe Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, thinks that way. And pretty much everyone in the House of Representatives, except Thomas Macy and maybe a couple others, thinks that way. The Democrats and the Republicans, they have disagreements between each other over what we should be spending it on. The Republicans want tax cuts and border security and a big military, where the Democrats want the social safety net and welfare and public infrastructure bills. But for the most part, except for just a handful, they do agree that a $2 trillion deficit, or $2.5 trillion deficit, it's looking like it's shaping up to be, is not a problem when it is. Elon Musk, actually, before he let his emotions start getting the better of him and devolving into personal attacks, had some good statistics about saying not only does this bill do a $2.5 trillion deficit, it like 25% of all government tax revenue is just going to interest on the national debt. And because there's a bigger deficit, that number is going to go up. Even without a major interest rate hike, that number could be up to 30% by the end of Trump's term, which anyone with any bit inkling of common sense should be able to understand as unsustainable. One hedge manager whose opinions I'm coming to respect more and more, Ray Dalio, I've quoted him on this program several times. He's the author of a new book, How Nations Go Broke, which looks at nations across history that have gone broke. He says if he had to put a number on it, he's estimating the United States has 3 years, give or take a year, before we have a major bond crisis. Unless we cut the deficit to below 3% of GDP. He's not even saying we have to get rid of the deficit. He's just saying it needs to be below 3% of GDP because that's the rate the economy grows at. This deficit's probably going to be around 8% of GDP, depending on how the tariffs affect the GDP. So twice as big. We might be able to swallow $1 trillion deficit and limp along for several more years. But we cannot swallow a $2.5 trillion deficit. And you're looking at a major bond crisis in 3.5 years, which does put some context to why Elon Musk is so upset. I've seen a number of other MAGA conservatives, some of the ones who have been with Trump longer and are maybe a little bit more loyal to Trump's brand, saying that, like, well, Trump's just being practical. He knows the Senate won't pass Musk's budget, so he's just doing the best he can. We just need to pass this bill and then try to make slow but steady progress going forward. None of them actually realize that, like I said, if Ray Dalio's math is correct, and I think it may be, this isn't something that where we need slow but steady progress. It's like we need to cut the deficit in half in the next, before the end of Trump's term, definitely. Or America may be passing a point of no return where our creditors are demanding so much higher interest rates that no matter how much you cut the budget, you're in what they call a debt spiral. You can't tax the people fast enough to keep up with the rising interest.
And I like that connection you made back to the debt and the emotional immaturity. Psalm 37 and verse 21 says, "The wicked borrow and cannot pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives." And that really is the United States right now. And the Bible says, well, it's wickedness. Like, America is borrowing at a rate that it won't be able to pay back. And you've had Donald Trump talk about, okay, well, we'll say we'll just give you half. On a government level, even inflation and inflating away the debt. So that your $1 trillion, or now it's like $30 trillion debt suddenly isn't worth as much because we printed more money. I mean, that's a way of borrowing and not paying back. And the Bible says that is wickedness. So this is a character issue, and yeah, it's a terminal sickness. It's something that will require radical action to fix if it's not too late already. And okay, maybe Elon Musk has been too personal with Donald Trump, but at least he does have some urgency in dealing with this problem, unlike anyone else. So where is this leading if America doesn't turn this around?
Yeah, well, there's definitely, like I said, even there's Psalms about why you shouldn't do this deficit spending. There's Bible prophecies about this being a curse if America turns away from God's law, one in particular in Deuteronomy 28, saying that if you turn away from God, the others will lend to you and you won't lend to them. So if you're borrowing more than you're lending out, you're in debt. So that is a prophecy right there, that the debt is a curse. And we have an article we can put in the show notes. It's one of our trends articles, talked about why the trumpet watches America's economic collapse, which spends quite a bit of time explaining why America is the richest nation in the world, because of promises God made to Abraham about birthright blessings that were passed from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph, then to Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who forefathered the United States of America and the British Commonwealth. So these two nations have been the wealthiest nations ever because of these birthright blessings. But if they turn away from God's law, those blessings were promised to be stripped from them. And the debt crisis is actually one example of how birthright blessings can be stripped someone as kind of like a self-inflicted wound. There's other prophecies about God punishing Israel by weather disasters or raising up foreign enemies and things that require some supernatural intervention to happen. But this debt crisis is something to where, like I said, God gave it, the United States in particular, to where at its height, it controlled 40% of the planet's gross domestic product, and it still can't balance its budget. And now is going bankrupt really due to its own actions. And as we've pointed out in this program several times before, the late Herbert W. Armstrong really thought that a banking crisis in America would end up being the catalyst that enabled a United States of Europe to invade. Because back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even today, it was hard to think, like, how is, even as the United States of Europe, how are they going to have the military power to take on the United States? We spend so much more on our military than even the entire European continent does. But this debt crisis that Ray Dalio is predicting in the next 3 years or so is something that could really level that playing field.
Especially when you look at Germany with much lower debt. I saw Bulgaria will be on course to join the Eurozone. I think their debt is something like 26% of their GDP, which, I mean, we don't think of Bulgaria as a wealthy country, but they've been much more responsible with their borrowing than the United States has. So, yeah, and then there's the fact that America just underpins the entire financial system. It can bring the whole house crashing down. Well, thank you for that, and that additional reading as well. The trends article section on the top right-hand corner of our website. There's a lot of great foundational material there that you can study to understand and trying to go through right from the basics why we're watching some of these essential trends. What else can you tell us about the news from the English-speaking world this week, Andrew?
Yeah, well, two other stories that are kind of related to our main story in different ways. One is, while many MAGA conservatives are feeling betrayed by President Trump over the big, beautiful budget bill, they're also feeling betrayed somewhat by President Trump over a new national citizens database he's creating. He's actually working with, the White House is working with Palantir. It's a tech company founded by Trump supporter Peter Thiel, to create a database of American citizens, just to help the government track different information about different citizens. This is something that a lot of civil rights advocates criticized Barack Obama for, buying up a data center in Utah that could track phone calls without warrants, and really making up a fairly Orwellian surveillance state. Foreign Policy magazine had pointed out at one point that the surveillance state Obama's built is probably bigger than anything else in the history of the planet. We don't use it quite as authoritarianly as like communist China does, but the infrastructure's there. And is definitely one, like a disturbing thing that we've pointed to quite a bit in our editor-in-chief, Mr. Gerald Flurry's book, America Under Attack, just kind of building what he called a turnkey authoritarian state, like where the infrastructure for a dictatorship is there and all you have to do is turn the key. A number of people were thinking that hopefully Donald Trump was going to dismantle some of this, but this new plan with Palantir, like again, with that turnkey point, I don't necessarily have any evidence that Donald Trump plans to use this in a bad way, but he's definitely building the infrastructure for a citizens database on a level equal to Barack Obama, if not exceeding him. So that's one story we'll keep an eye on going into the future. Also had some statements, technically not this week, but last week, that were pretty interesting from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, wanting Canada to join the Rearm Europe project by Canada Day this year. That would be July 1st this year, so less than a month away. That's a project to really boost Europe's defense spending in light of Russian aggression. Prime Minister Carney points out that currently Canada's like 75% of Canada's defense spending ends up in the United States, buying weapons and partnerships and other things like that. So he feels like Canada's military's overly reliant on the United States, and he'd like to see it much more reliant on the European Union. So we'll see how far his plans go, but definitely Canada's shift away from a defense alliance with the United States to a defense alliance with Europe could end up being significant in that European military attack that happens after America's debt crisis that we were talking about earlier.
Well, thank you for that, Andrew. Talking of Europe, I wanted to talk about a few key elections that we had this week. There was a lot of focus going into it on Poland's presidential election on Sunday. The Telegraph wrote, "The future of Europe will be decided in this election." It was a runoff election, so they'd had the first round earlier, and the top two candidates had gone off to this second round. It ended up being the narrowest vote in Polish history. And it was a vote basically between the new right and the old mainstream. You had kind of the upstarts. They're sometimes called the far right. I think fringe right is maybe a less pejorative term. Generally in Europe, this movement is anti-abortion, anti-migration, skeptical of climate change, opposed to wokeness, opposed to LGBT, etc. In the UK, that's like reform and being opposed to Europe is a major part of that. Within Europe itself, it's more, well, Europe supports things that they don't like, but they're not necessarily ideologically opposed to Europe. Karol Nawrocki, the former boxer, historian, independent, he was kind of the champion for this side in Poland. And he was facing off against former Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, a member of the Civic Coalition, and he basically represented the mainstream in Poland. Some countries, I'd say the mainstream is left. Sometimes they're right. He's nominally from a kind of a more mainstream right party, but generally they're pro-abortion, pro-homosexual rights, prepared to damage economies and livelihoods in the pursuit of net zero, and pro-EU. And it was Karol Nawrocki and the upstarts, the fringe right, that won this election 50.89 to 49.11. And again, this was being watched as a key bellwether for which way is Europe going. These traditional establishment Brussels parties or the upstart fringe parties, many of whom have views that are deemed unacceptable. And then the same week, we also saw the Dutch government collapse this week. Geert Wilders, the kind of the fringe right leader in the Netherlands, pulled out of the coalition after his demands for a greater crackdown on asylum seekers weren't met. And both these results really show the paralysis that the rise of this fringe is opening up in Europe. In Poland, you have a prime minister and a parliament on one side and a president on the other. So the president now comes along and vetoes almost anything of significance that parliament and the prime minister does. In the Netherlands, it took them they had an election in November 2023. It took them about 9 months to form a government, and that government didn't manage to last a year. Portugal is stuck in the same rut. They just held their third election in 3 years and nothing really changed. The Netherlands is expected to hold another election probably October, and probably to be in, as far as Geert Wilders is concerned, exactly the same place. The French parliament is pretty much entirely non-functional, split evenly between the far left, the center, and the fringe right. So all of this is leading to a lot of paralysis. And after everyone was watching the Polish elections, asking which way will Europe go? And I think the answer that they gave with their very close election and then confirmed by what happened in the Netherlands is nowhere. These two different camps are very closely balanced. You throw in the left and they're basically split three ways. We've got countries stuck in unstable cycles of elections, unable to come together with coalitions. I mean, the exact feature of the different government depends on the local electoral system, but the underlying issues are the same. There's all these divisions prevent them getting anything done. I think this points us to some dramatic prophecies from Herbert W. Armstrong. All the way back in 1945, he talked about the way that Germany would rise again as part of a, quote, European Union. And he saw that it would be first an economic union, then a military union. And this is what he wrote in 1953, tremendously prophetic. He said, "Suddenly the world will behold a United States of Europe. Some of the Balkan nations, which have been under Russia's boot, will be members of it. 10 dictators in Europe will unite in a gigantic European combine, turning their united military power and resources over to the new leader of Europe. Not only this, but a great religious leader will also emerge in a world-shaking pact with the military leader, which will far overshadow the effect of the Hitler-Stalin non-aggression pact of 1939. It will be a union of church and state. The religious influences will be used to cement together and unify these 10 nations. They will include Germany and Italy, probably Spain and Portugal and France, Greece, and probably some of the Balkan nations from among Yugoslavia, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, or others. I can't tell you now which nations. He did say definitely Britain will not be in it, and definitely the whole thing will be fascist. And it will be well to bear in mind that Nazism is merely the German form of fascism, so it will in fact be a Nazi revival." So that's what we're looking to rise in Europe. And just this paralysis that is afflicting the entire continent is paving the way for this. Mr. Armstrong made these prophecies based on what the Bible says about the future of Europe. Revelation 17 describes a beast with 7 heads, and it explains how that each head is another resurrection of an empire that repeatedly rises and falls, one led by a woman, a type of a false church. And that can only be describing the Holy Roman Empire that we've seen in Europe. In World War II, we saw the 6th resurrection of this Holy Roman Empire, and now the 7th is rising up. And many of these so-called fringe right or far-right parties want a stronger role for religion. They might pave the way for that religious revival that Mr. Armstrong talked about. And there are things that some of these fringe right parties are doing that are kind of pro-Nazi. You look at some people in the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, they certainly have glorified the Nazis. But also it's important to look at the blueprints produced by the Nazis for cementing Germany's dominance over Europe were dusted off and used for the foundation of the European Union. So much of the euro is based off a plan that the Reichsbank, the Bank of the German Empire under Hitler, came up with to establish and cement Germany's dominance over all of Europe's economies. You look as well at how the mainstream has responded, cracking down on speech that they disagree with, overturning the election in Romania, basically the whole establishment, judiciary, politicians, European bureaucrats that would normally be screaming blue murder, doing nothing. Meanwhile, fining Poland 1 million euros a day for a disagreement over how judges are appointed. You look at the way that the mainstream is going after Marine Le Pen in France. These aren't people that believe in democracy and free speech. So you could see fascism coming in from the establishment, the European establishment, that way as well. And probably bits from both sides will play an important role in this coming power. And maybe the Catholic Church will come in and help heal some of the divisions between these different groups. But the paralysis that this has produced might be the most important contribution to this transformation coming soon. And with all of Europe just grinding to a halt, unable to have functioning governments, that clears the path for a strong leader. You then throw in what Andrew was talking about the American financial system blowing up and the effect that will have on Europe, the crisis that will have on Europe. And then if you're just stuck with coalition negotiations and bickering, and meanwhile, maybe people are even starving, economies are breaking down, unemployment is at 20%. That is unsustainable. And that is exactly the kind of circumstances where you could have a strong man just come in there and take power. Hitler could only take over Germany after the economy had crashed and its electoral system had failed in this similar way. Napoleon took over only after you have bitter divisions and faction infighting almost destroying the French Republic. And Mr. Fleury has continued Mr. Armstrong's warning ever since the first year of the Trumpet magazine. If a real crisis develops, will Germany call for a new Führer, he wrote in December 1991. Your Bible says that is going to happen. That crisis will probably be triggered by an economic collapse in the US. And again, and we've played a lot of the clips on this show, he talks about how a weak coalition could pave the way for this leader to rise. And he's talking mostly about Germany and a weak coalition rising in Germany. But you have weak coalitions all over Europe. All of this could very easily pave the way for this strong man to rise. The stage is all set for this revival of this Holy Roman Empire. And we have our free book, The Holy Roman Empire in Prophecy, that we can send you or that you can read online that will give you more information about that. If you just go to our website, thetrumpet.com, click on the literature tab, we'd be very happy to send that to you. And that will show you in detail what the Bible says is happening in Europe. But more importantly, it will show you why God is allowing this, what God is doing here. It will show you God's love for Europe, for Germany, for Italy, for the United States, for Britain, for Russia. That's in there too. And the way that God is using this to usher in a very real kingdom of God that is soon going to be ruling on this earth. Well, a couple of other stories as well from Europe I wanted to mention. I did mention earlier that Bulgaria is now set to join the euro. The European Central Bank and the European Commission this week announced that it had met all the requirements to join. The Eurozone finance ministers will confirm this on July 8th. Assuming that's confirmed, that will pave the way for Bulgaria to adopt the common currency on January 1st. 2026. There's a lot of Bulgarians that aren't so keen on that. 43% are in favor of adopting the euro, 50% opposed. Most would like a referendum on the issue. The Constitutional Court says no, basically, because as by being an EU member, Bulgaria is obligated to join the euro once the conditions are met. That is technically there in the treaties. What a lot of other countries do is just deliberately never meet the conditions, so they can just be like, oh well, we didn't meet it, so we can't join. But I think there is a pretty strong, the pro-Europeans in Bulgaria do very much want to join, and they took their opportunity to lock that in, even if the country itself isn't firmly on side. And this really does help cement Germany's control over the Balkans. And you'll notice Bulgaria was on that list of countries that Mr. Armstrong talked about that could be some of these 10 kings, these 10 nations that form part of this Holy Roman Empire. And Romania, Bulgaria, Germany does have a very solid hold on that region there. It also is a major vote of confidence in the euro at a time where there's a lack of confidence in the dollar and the euro could take over. Mr. Flurry has a book, Germany's Conquest of the Balkans, if you'd like to know more about that particular part of the world. But there he quoted this from Stratfor, just a secular news analysis organization back in 2002, which stated, Germany is seeking to reassert itself at the center of Europe, and the Balkans play a big part in that strategy. It is an area where Germany can expand its military reach without frightening either itself or its neighbors. Berlin would also like to build on its ties with Slovenia, Croatia, Albania, Bosnia, and Bulgaria to pull both Southern and Eastern Europe under its wing as the EU expands. And really, that's what's happened. It's very much moved into this area without really frightening its neighbors, and it has a massive amount of dominance there. And that really is a powerful proof and place to look to see signs of Germany rising. And that's why we do have a whole booklet on that subject, Germany's conquest of the Balkans. And then finally, a meeting with Donald Trump this week with a lot less drama than that between Mr. Trump and Elon Musk. And that is German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He met President Trump in the White House. He was probably I think his biggest goal from this meeting was to avoid drama. He didn't want to be browbeaten like the leaders of Ukraine or South Africa. I don't think he'll mind at all being overshadowed by the Musk-Trump brouhaha. So they sat down. Fairly sedate, President Trump called Merz a very good man to deal with, said he hoped to reach a good trade deal with the EU, and also said that though they were talking about having the presence of 40,000 US troops in Germany, he wasn't imminently going to pull them out. That would be a big relief for Mr. Merz. In return, Mr. Merz, he gave the president a copy of his grandfather, Friedrich Trump's 1869 birth certificate, which apparently President Trump was quite pleased with. The president accepted an invitation to come and visit Germany. I think he's going to visit Friedrich Trump's birthplace as part of that visit. Merz is really trying to play up those ties between President Trump and Germany. He told the president, Merz did, we are prepared to take on a bit more leadership responsibility in Europe when it comes to future trade agreements. So a pretty auspicious start for the two of them. And America is eager to pass on the baton of global leadership. And I think you see that in this meeting where they're ready to pass on a whole lot of responsibility to Germany. And you can see the Merz was pretty nervous going into this. But at the same time, America is very quick and quite eager to welcome a military strong Germany that steps up and leads Europe. And Trumpet executive editor Stephen Flurry had a lot to say about that on Thursday's Trumpet Daily Show. So you could go back, listen to that if you want more information on that meeting. Well, moving on to Asia, we had a remarkable story this week about deadly fungi being smuggled across the Mexican border. We'll go to our Asia correspondent, Jeremiah Jacques, to hear more about it.
The big story that I wanted to talk about is that two Chinese nationals tried to smuggle a fungus into the United States, which has the potential to cause total crop failure in all kinds of species and just to wreak all kinds of havoc on the food supply and health of Americans. The charges against these two were unsealed on Tuesday, and the details of the case are very disturbing. One of these Chinese citizens was a 33-year-old woman, Young King Jian, who was a researcher at the University of Michigan. And then the other was her boyfriend, 34-year-old Zun Young Liu. And Liu was entering into the United States to visit his girlfriend when border security stopped him and searched him. And they found what appeared to be just a wad of balled up tissues. But the border agents opened this up and they found 4 different bags containing different strands of this fungus called Fusarium graminearum. This is just an extremely dangerous fungus. It's classified by the FBI as a potential agroterrorism weapon. And that's because it can devastate many plant species, including some of the ones that we rely on the most, such as corn, barley, wheat, and rice. And it can also do all kinds of damage if it's ingested, causing liver damage and reproductive defects as well. So it's just a vicious fungus, which could potentially be used as a biological weapon, really a weapon of terror. And the FBI has evidence that this woman, Young King Jian, was loyal to the Chinese Communist Party and that she was being funded by the party as well. So that makes it look like this very well may have been a concerted effort by the Chinese Communist Party to get this vicious fungus into the hands of a person who had expertise with plant microbe interaction. That was a department where this woman worked at the University of Michigan. It's called the Molecular Plant Microbe Interaction Laboratory. And this woman, first she lied to U.S. authorities, saying that she didn't know what her boyfriend was trying to bring into the U.S. But then his electronic devices were examined and authorities found a conversation between the two of them about how to smuggle this fungus from China into the United States where she could get her hands on it. So it's a huge relief that this plan failed and that those authorities stopped Zanyang Liu and found this fungus, because it has, major implications for America's food security. So it is a huge relief that they were caught, but it's very, very sobering to get this glimpse into the dark heart of the Chinese Communist Party and just to see the capabilities of some of the party's operatives. It's very sobering to be reminded of their goals and their intense desire to harm the American people in any way that they can. And of course, there are many, many other Chinese nationals in the US right now working in various sensitive positions in research labs and in government facilities. And in most cases, these are individuals who are, they're here legally and they're here to build a good life for their families and they're here to become Americans. And those are the kind of people that America needs more of. But it is clear that the loyalties of some of these individuals, such as this woman who was working at the University of Michigan, their loyalties are not to America, but are to the Chinese Communist Party. And the implications of that are quite worrying. But this all shows that we're moving deeper into an era that the Bible calls the times of the Gentiles. You can read about that in Luke chapter 21. And it's about a time when the United States is no longer the dominant global power, and instead, nations like China become globally dominant. And it's clear from the passages about this that this is a dark era, not just for the United States, but really for the whole world, as more and more power is amassed by various ruthless regimes. And we do have an article that goes into detail about that era and specifically about China's role in all of that. For anyone who would like to understand it all, this article is called Wake Up to the Threat from China.
Thank you for that, Jeremiah. That is just a shocking story. It's one, it seems like several of the stories that we've seen. I mean, the drone story that we talked about on Wednesday seems like this, where we're seeing things that we've talked about as theoretical possibilities being revealed as actual facts. You know, for years, people have talked about terrorists coming across the border, or theoretically enemies like China smuggling in a bioweapon. And I don't think anyone really doubted those. But to see this actually happen is pretty stunning.
That's right. Yes, this really does seem to bring what previously was just kind of an abstract, almost theoretical threat into the realm, very much into the realm of reality.
And we've talked as well, I think. Oh no, it was on the Trumpet Daily. I was talking about somebody inspecting kind of components for the electrical grid and finding where China had added little radios so that things could be shut down remotely or even damaged remotely. I mean, there's a level of a scary level of strategy going on where China is quite clearly planning for a time where they can just bring down so much of America without even having to directly use any military assets, whether it's bioweapons, hacking. I mean, there's a real thought through preparation there. So, the Times of the Gentiles, what you pointed at, a great resource to go and learn more information on this. What other stories did you have for us from Asia this week?
Well, first I wanted to talk about Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said on Wednesday that Russia will respond strongly to Ukraine's audacious attacks inside of Russia that happened on June 1st. Those attacks were just an incredible strike against Russian heavy bombers specifically, and just Russian air power in general. Ukraine used drones to take out what we believe is 41 very important, valuable warplanes. So it was just a major blow to Russia. Ukraine also blew up some important rail bridges around the same time in the south of Russia, and also 3 different Iskander missile launchers inside of Russia. So these are all serious blows. And Vladimir Putin is just seething. So he said that Russia will respond strongly. That was during a phone call that he held with US President Donald Trump on Wednesday. And then we saw some of that response last night. That's when Russia fired 400 drones and 40 missiles at various sites inside of Ukraine. Ukraine was able to intercept apparently north of 90% of these, but many of them still were able to get through, and they killed several Ukrainians. So hopefully that will be the end of Putin's response. But this was just very serious damage that Ukraine inflicted on Russia. And we know that Putin still has tactical nuclear weapons in his arsenal, which are just terrifyingly powerful. He also has huge conventional missiles, such as the hypersonic Orishniks, that could do stunning amounts of damage if a barrage of those were fired. And Putin also has 50,000 troops that he has recently amassed near Kharkiv, Ukraine. Analysts have not been entirely sure what his plan is with that buildup, but maybe they will be dispatched soon to try to pay Ukraine back even further for those strikes. So we don't know exactly what will happen in the days and weeks ahead, but we do know that Putin has shown over and over again during these 40 months of full-scale war that he will go to horrific lengths to win and to avenge any embarrassments. So we may see a horrifying new chapter in this already horrifying war. And then I had one final story here about South Korea. They elected a new president on Tuesday. His name is Lee Jae-myung, and he is dramatically different from his predecessor, Yoon Suk Yeol. Yoon was the one who declared martial law in South Korea back in December, in just a very bizarre affair there. And as part of that martial law order, Yoon actually banned all political activities, including convening of South Korea's National Assembly. Yoon didn't want any voting to take place. So he banned that, and he stationed police outside of the National Assembly's entrances to prevent lawmakers from being able to enter and vote. But many lawmakers at that time were just appalled by Yoon's martial law declaration. And so they maneuvered around the police. Some of them even climbed over fences so that they could get inside and vote to lift that martial law order. And this new president, Mr. Lee, he was among those lawmakers who climbed a fence and voted. And that whole fiasco, of course, led to the impeachment of President Yoon. And now Lee, this man who scaled that fence 6 months ago to vote against Yoon's martial law order, he is now the new president. So it's very dramatic. And what could possibly be even more dramatic now is that we could see South Korea move away from its close ties with the United States and toward China. President Lee has a long record of skepticism toward the United States, and he's been very critical of US President Donald Trump, particularly his tariff policy. And Lee has also said that his predecessor was too antagonistic toward China. And he has said that South Korea should just sit it out if China ends up invading Taiwan. So it's still early days, but this could signal a big turning point for South Korea. South Korea has, of course, been an important ally to the United States for decades now, but that could be about to change, which is something that the trumpet has long been expecting to happen.
Thank you very much for that, Jeremiah. The Musk and Trump fallout wasn't the only government fallout this week. Here in the UK, the Reform Party is going through a bit of a spat. Their Muslim chairman has quit with disagreements over Muslim face coverings for women as the catalyst for him leaving. But there's a divide in that party that has been going on for months. And as they seem like they're all set to take over UK politics, a lot is now riding on what happens with this civil war and whether that means the end for them or not. There's even more riding on the divisions going on within Israel. They've got a literal war going on, but the government there is increasingly divided and could even fall as soon as next week. To give us the latest on this, we'll go to our Middle East correspondent, Mihailo Zekic.
Yes, so on Wednesday, Yesh Atid, which is the opposition party of former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, filed a notion to schedule a vote of non-confidence to take place in Israel's Knesset next week. The current coalition has a majority led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Normally, those stop non-confidence votes dead in the water. So why is Yair Lapid doing this now? Well, there are big tensions within Netanyahu's coalition in and of itself, specifically dealing with two coalition partners that are orthodox or ultra-orthodox interest parties, basically. And the squabble revolves around whether or not to draft yeshiva students or ultra-Orthodox Talmudic studies students into the military. A little bit of background. Technically, there is a universal conscription mandate in Israel. They need it. They've always needed it. But originally, when the state of Israel was being formed, the original Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, gave an exemption to Orthodox students of the Torah, of the Talmud in schools so they could devote their time to study. When the exemption was originally given, there was, I believe, only 200 people that qualified for the exemption. Now there's 55,000. So you could imagine for the rest of the country that has to send their sons and daughters into the military, seeing this one demographic that already gets heavy subsidies from the government so they don't have to work so they can keep studying their literature, that they're all even getting exempted from taking part in the common fight and risking their lives to help the state of Israel.
Right, well, I was just going to say that it ties into a lot of other pre-existing divisions within Israel where you've kind of got three camps almost, to oversimplify. You've got the secular Jews, you've got the religious Jews, and then you've got the ultra-Orthodox. And there's a lot of anger at the ultra-Orthodox because of this specific, that they don't have to go and fight. They do get a lot of welfare or state handouts. And originally, like you said, it was meant to be for a much smaller group. It's ballooned. Benjamin Netanyahu is dependent on ultra-Orthodox parties for his time in office. And it feels like this has spurred almost this vicious cycle where unhappiness with the ultra-Orthodox and perceptions of special treatment there have enhanced this division where people don't want to work with Netanyahu. And the more these other people refuse to work with Netanyahu, the more dependent he is on the ultra-Orthodox parties, and then the more concessions he has to give the ultra-Orthodox, which then widens the division between him and other groups. So it really is, okay, it's about conscription, but it ties into some very broad divisions within Israeli society.
Exactly. And the particular sticking point with this conscription is that the government is mandated to start giving these draft orders to these ultra-Orthodox potential soldiers. There's been thousands and thousands of people that have been dodging the draft, and the government has been ignoring the draft. That for the coalition partners, that's not good enough for them. They want a law passed by the Knesset saying that these guys are forever exempt, we don't have to worry about this, etc., and Netanyahu is refusing. So you're seeing, on the one hand, these secular interest parties, which, I mean, are going to hate Benjamin Netanyahu anyway. They're using this as an excuse to try and leverage him from power. But for these parties, I mean, all the people that are being impacted by this conscription, they're they're their entire voter support base. So even if, say, they want to keep the government going, they can't really do that with the mandate of their voters. Whatever happens next week is going to be interesting because, I mean, Netanyahu has been ignoring going after the draft dodgers to this point. If the next government comes in, they almost certainly won't. But at the same time, these parties perhaps are trying to blackmail Netanyahu and get some more concessions, etc. But either way, a vote is coming, and if everybody dislikes Netanyahu enough, we could see Israel falling into new elections, as you said, during wartime. And repeated polling since October 7th suggests that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his Likud party would plummet if a vote were to be held because of October 7th, because it happened under his watch and because we're still dealing with the after effects. So depending how things go, we could finally see the end of arguably Israel's greatest political escape artist.
Like you say, he is Israel's greatest political escape artist, so it definitely would be too soon to write him off. But also it would be wrong to exaggerate the scale of the threats against him. He feels very needed right now. That you've got Donald Trump going to a nuclear deal or pushing in that direction, and you've got some updates that you can share on that in just a minute. And Iran is an absolutely existential threat to Israel. Like, they've got the same ideology as Hamas. Hamas can come in there and kidnap hundreds of Israelis and kill babies, and it's evil and it's tragic. But an Iran with nuclear weapons can do a whole lot more damage. So who is there that can deal with this? I mean, I'm not saying that Netanyahu himself will be able to deal with this. He's in a really tough spot with even with Donald Trump pushing towards nuclear negotiations. But he seems like Israel's best hope. So, I mean, where do you see this political crisis within Israel going?
Either it's going to go dead in the water within a few days and things are going to just keep going on in the status quo, or we could see Israel being thrown into complete turmoil. If you remember the election before Mr. Netanyahu received his current mandate a few years ago, there was basically, Likud wasn't able to put together a government, but neither really was anybody else, except if you got all these competing parties with different agendas coming in whose basically only goal was they don't want Netanyahu in government. With this case, if the election goes forward and you see, say, for example, the ultra-Orthodox doubling down on their parties, coming out in droves to vote to make sure they don't get conscripted, as well as the anti-Netanyahu bloc sensing blood in the water coming in, then you could potentially see even some of Likud's normal votes being shaved off to the ultra-Orthodox community and having even worse political deadlock. And since, again, they're fighting a war right now, this would be the first election Israel has had since the war started. Since they're coming close to the end of the war and the discussions are coming up on what to do with Gaza to put it together, who to give it to, etc., that they'd be having this kind of domestic political deadlock would put the government in paralysis and encourage maybe Hamas that can look at that, or Hezbollah can look at that, see, okay, the government's distracted from us right now, Netanyahu's out of the picture, we could start gaining back some ground.
So, I mean, what insight does the Bible and Bible prophecy add to this situation?
Well, before we get to that, there's one other story that technically from a separate matter, but ties in with Israel's general instability that factors into this. On June 5th, the Wall Street Journal published an article revealing that Israel has been funding a Palestinian militant group in Gaza with weapons. Does that sound a little strange? Well, this particular group, called the Popular Forces, basically sprang out of Gaza's black market, trying to give people goods outside of the market controlled by Hamas. And Israel has seen this as a potential shift of power, a native Palestinian resistance group to Hamas. They've been giving them weapons, including weapons that they themselves have taken from Hamas. And now Popular Forces controls a small sliver of territory near Rafah. Their leader, Yasser Abu Shabab, has admitted to stealing foreign aid coming in that's supposed to be for everybody else. He's said on the record, "I'm no angel." So, but at the same time, he's not an Islamist. It's basically arming the mafia against the jihadis. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has been questioned about this, and he put out a video confirming that this is going on, saying, quote, "What's wrong with this? It is good. It saves the lives of Israeli soldiers," end quote. Now, this movement right now is pretty small. Who knows how long it will last? They are fighting Hamas, and Hamas, for the small ragtag group of people, if Israel doesn't necessarily fight right next to them, they could be in very well big trouble. But some analysts think that Israel might be propping this group up as a native-born alternative to Hamas rule that they could implement and, or at least market to the outside world, saying, hey, you don't want us to come into Gaza, you don't want us to relocate 2 million people to Libya and build the Las Vegas of the Middle East like Donald Trump wants. Here's a group that is springing up organically that we are willing to hand over power to. Israel, for their part, has not admitted any of this, but considering they've been pretty tight-lipped on what their end goals are, it's a fair estimate to say if they could do that, they would.
So again, you've brought a couple of different strands. Netanyahu potentially being out of office, working with these Palestinian groups. How does Bible prophecy inform us in looking at the outcome here?
Well, Bible prophecy doesn't say anything in particular on whether Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be the man to lead Israel all the way, but it does say in Zechariah 12, verse 3, God is speaking of prophetically what's going on in Judah and Jerusalem in these latter days, and he says that he's going to make Jerusalem a burdensome stone to all that burden themselves with it. And our editor-in-chief has written, Mr. Gerald Fleury has written plenty of material that everybody that's tried to control Jerusalem or govern from Jerusalem, including the Israelis, they've all had serious political setbacks, and where perhaps this even leaches into some of these domestic problems we're seeing with Benjamin Netanyahu and how he's hardly even able to hold the government together during wartime. Regarding the Palestinian issue, another prophecy in Hosea 5:13 we go to often that speaks of Judah seeing a wound that pressures it to go to foreign peoples for help. That wound, Mr. Gerald Fleury has written in his free booklet, Jerusalem and Prophecy. If you look at the Hebrew wording of it, it actually means a bandage for a wound or a remedy for a wound. In other words, the remedy is the wound. And Mr. Fleury has tied it in with the peace process with the Palestinians. Where this little group, the Popular Forces, fits in, we're not sure, but Israel has been down this route before. The Palestinian Authority was supposed to be this Israeli-sponsored new alternative to help govern the Palestinian territories, and look what they've become. If they try to sponsor an indigenous Palestinian army to run Gaza, okay, maybe they're against Hamas right now, but giving a new Palestinian group weapons, is that the smartest idea for Israel to guarantee its security? If this is the route that Israel takes, you can be sure it's going to be another wound, another remedy that turns into a wound for the state of Israel.
So all of this is the futility of trying to do politics, trying to solve these problems without God getting involved. And that is really a big takeaway from all of this, I think, where you just see all around the world so many, in some cases, great minds. I think when you look at someone like Elon Musk, there's no denying that he is a great mind for some things, trying to deal with these problems on their own, and it's all going wrong in all kinds of different ways. And really, Israel's solution and all the solutions to all of these problems is to look to God. And it's a real practical repentance of looking to God for guidance. And I think I also promised an update on what's going on with Iran, another very misguided deal. Could you give us a quick update on that and any other stories from the Middle East that you feel worth including?
Yeah, so on June 2nd, Axios reported that, quote, the nuclear deal proposal the U.S. gave Iran on Saturday would allow limited low-level uranium enrichment on Iranian soil for a to-be-determined period of time, end quote, citing two sources with direct knowledge. That little section right there, that set off alarm bells throughout a lot of conservative circles in the U.S., Israel especially, wait, what, you're allowing Iran to keep enriching uranium? This is exactly the Barack Obama nuclear deal. Don't tell us it's not. Like, this is exactly what made it so disastrous. Hours after that story got published, President Trump went on social media saying that the only thing we could accept is no enrichment. So either somebody's setting the record straight or there's damage control being done, but either way, somebody is lying. Further, hours after President Trump said that, Iran publicly said that they're open to an international consortium of the U.S. and different Middle Eastern groups managing a nuclear enrichment program as long as it's on Iranian soil, which might sound like a compromise. It's not. They've always said that they want to have perpetually the ability to enrich their own uranium, which they'd only want if they wanted to build a nuclear weapon. So no deal yet, no texts that we could look at, but the more we're seeing this, the more and more it looks like it's Barack Obama's nuclear deal. And even hypothetically, even if this period is for 3 months or whatever, like a grace period, and it gets implemented, who's not to say that down the road 3 months comes on and they say, well, we could just keep doing what we're doing. That even if this is supposed to be going to a nuclear-free zone, that is what everybody's thinking.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mihailo. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us this week. Thank you to George Haddad for engineering and production. If you have any questions, comments, please do get in touch. trumpetworld@thetrumpet.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about ideas for future episodes, feedback on past episodes, all of that. We will be back on Wednesday with our regular show. And until then, keep watching your world.